money to put the money back into this fund. The other thing that, and I was doing a little investigating with this, and you can correct me with this, Grace, if I'm wrong. I understand that many townships, in certain cases, do use sewage surplus money to help offset costs for their townships, such as what was done back in 2008, 2009, so that there was only a penny increase in taxes. That was a benefit for the township, for the people of the township. And then the last one, the $100,000, there's a mandate stating that if you have surplus money, then you have to use the surplus money. Is that correct?
Well, the surplus money is really the sewer utility surplus ban. However, there's a state mandate this year that we could only have a 2% levy cap. With our revenue losses over the last 2 years, and really we had no major expense increases other than pensions, we had no choice, because we can't go to the state and say, help us, let us raise taxes. They would have said, but you have this pool of money you're not tapping into. Or they would have said, go for a referendum. And that would have, well, most of you've seen how they all went. They didn't go well across the, there weren't that many, and they didn't go well across the state, because the exact, I think I should say that both Bob Swisher and I would not recommend something to the committee that isn't, number one, legal, all the way across the board. Utility surpluses are a useful resource for the current fund budget. There are towns that have sewer, electric, water, they have multiple utilities, and they use some from every one of those. Most of those communities are the AAA rated communities because they have those pools of money that they can dip into to offset the raising of taxes. So that's an obvious. I mean, Bob and I would not steer you in a direction. Now, the thing that I will say, and I'm happy to meet with whomever, Elaine or whoever else wants to join us, the thing you have to remember is you cannot commit future township committees to this payment. So we can come up with a plan, and we can say this is the plan. But if you have 3 new people 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now, they could say, I'm not making that appropriation to the sewer. We have to put more money into parks and playgrounds or fire or... So you can come up with a plan, but you don't, legally, you don't have to pay that money back. There is no requirement legally. Whether or not we're going to be able to make Elaine and I could come up with 20 years at whatever, $15,000. The problem there is that you have a levy cap that's not going away. I don't think the governor is going to release it, and I don't think the next governor will release it, because they're all trying to get taxes in line. So now you're going to say to your future committees, you have to raise $20,000 a year just to repay this sewer. Well, we all know the budgets, the revenues are getting smaller, and the expenses don't go away. I mean, we're down to what, very small staff here. You're already down a police officer this year, and I'm just stating the obvious. I don't think that I'll say $10,000 for the next 30 years. And you're talking about 30 years to pay that back. Mm-hmm. So do I see you making a $100,000 payment in the next 5 years? No way. Not under your budget constraints, because $100,000 is more than what we'll be able to do under the levy cap.
Right.
So, and that is an expense within the levy cap. That's what you have to remember. So although it's a wonderful idea, I honestly can't. Can I say 5 or 10,000? You probably squeeze it out of somewhere at some point, but are you going to be able to do it consistently for the next so many years? I don't know.
Well, see, that's actually it's a good thing you mentioned that. That's why I was calling this kind of a transition year, because it was a year that we didn't use surplus. Revenues were down by $255,000, including the sewer surplus was down $100,000. Capital surplus was down $75,000. Municipal court down $80,000. We had increased pension expense, healthcare, overall healthcare, but we were able to reduce healthcare costs by making some changes. This year we did reduce stipends to fire and rescue, reduced the police budget by $125,000. We had increased road budget because of difficult weather. Joe's here; he can, obviously speak to that. So, that's why, in responding, it said this was really a transition year, because it's the first year that we didn't have to use surplus, but yet this issue came up around that we really should have a repayment plan in place. And I know it came up at the last meeting, and obviously came up in the the reelection campaign literature that went out there. So I didn't want to not address it because obviously it's an issue that's on people's minds.
It is an issue on people's minds, and, you know, I made a promise, and I'm hoping that we can figure out some alternative to pay it back in a small way, and if the following committees don't do that, this is monies that are set aside for 880 residents for the infrastructure of their section of town. If something were to happen to their infrastructure of their sewer, these are the dollars that would be used to repair their infrastructure. It's not dollars that we just have sitting around. It's really about what could happen to their infrastructure. You know, the rest of us, we know, we're all on septic. We all have, you know, and we all deal with our own needs in our own way. And that's where it's not just, you know, I know that what you're talking about in other towns, but the majority of those people are flush because their entire town does that. When we're talking about, you know, only part of the town, I worry about that, you know, and you and I have had this conversation, and no, you didn't want to do it, and I know we were, you know, dreading having to do this, but you and I both know what we were faced against in 2008 and 2009. Let's just look at it. I mean, let's just try it. Let's just see, and maybe the rest of the governing bodies moving forward will feel the same way we do about the residents on one side of town.
Well, I don't think there's a person alive that wouldn't want to pay that.
Right,
I mean,
okay, so let's try
but
it.
that said,
I mean,
it's how to
and
get
the
there is what we
frustration
need.
at that time was to find out that so many residents didn't actually pay their bills.
businesses.
And businesses.
Who
I
weren't on
mean,
the
seriously, that was what we really were capitalizing. Right, Peter? We were here looking at this going, what? And no, it wasn't Grace, it was the former CFO.
So that's why, you know, I go back to, I think, you know, there's been things put in place, financial controls,
Absolutely.
and, you know, these
Absolutely. We
outstanding
had no
bills have been
choice.
taken care of, so, you know, when I do reference, you know, I think that we are on a, you know, a pretty good path for the township, I truly believe that, so, okay, we won't belabor it anymore, but I did want to address
And I
it.
said that at one of the workshops we were here, the night I went to the high school to talk. I said, yeah, great, this is the first time we didn't even go down before the Board of Local Finance. You know, we had 2 officers retire. What more could we want from that kind of benefit of not having to pay those kinds of
No,
salaries?
It was a difficult budget, but it
Certainly was better.
best one I've seen since I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, did you have anything else, Nate?
No,
Okay,
that's it.
all right. Joe, did you have anything else on your? Okay. Elaine?
Oh, it's me? It's
Yeah.
my turn? I thought I was talking all the time here.